Welcome to the first episode of Pinnacle Fitness and Wellness's interview series. I'm sitting here with Carly Feigan of Head to Health.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the first one.
Thank you.
First episode.
Thank you.
Looking forward to speaking to you. It's been a long time since we spoke, but we do train together and we've become very friendly, and we've had a lot of great conversations as we were training about nutrition and fitness and how they fit together. Carly handles most of my weight loss and nutrition people that I work with. Carly, why don't you give us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Well, I was trained, I have a degree in bachelor's in nutrition for many years ago. We don't want to go back too far. And I have various certifications that I took along the way, and one is in lifestyle and weight management. Prior to that, I have also some holistic training. Certification in American herbology, and I'm also a certified naturopath. However, the last 15 years of my career, I've focused specifically on weight loss. It seems to be my niche. I feel the most comfortable. I've helped the most people losing weight, and I'm passionate about it because I have an obese mother, or had an obese mother. So it's something that I feel very, near and dear to me, to really help people to get through the whole weight loss yo-yoing issue.
Sure. I know you've been able to connect with a lot of my clients too that essentially with the weight loss.
Yes.
I'm working together with just the fitness.
Yes.
And with that together.
It's been a great synergy of the right fitness training and the right meal plan. Got the magic formula.
Yes, so we've been very successful together, along with some of the medical doctors that have been referring us people too, because.
Yes.
They're usually very helpful with blood work and certain things, but when it comes to actual designing programs for fitness, most doctors will say, we need you to be active, but what does that mean to most people?
Yes.
And then they say, we need you to eat well. Well, what does that mean exactly? So creating specific, training programs as well as nutrition together, and with the doctors, we have a golden stamp we could seal on them, and that's why we've had so much success together.
Correct.
And obviously weight loss is different for different populations, which is something we always talk about. Weight loss is different for someone who's a teenager versus someone who's in their 70s. And, it's enormously different. And the understanding of what food is for younger populations and what they're eating is tough too, because they don't really have health education like they did when we were going to school. And phys ed is also much different than it once was when I was growing up. So why don't you give us some of your feelings on, weight loss for those two populations? Obviously, there's a big cascade between both of them.
So you mean the younger population, like under 18, and the aging population, or which two?
Let's do those two. Those two populations, under 18 and also aging population.
Well, the under 18, that's an interesting group, because I do have a few clients in that age range. And I always kind of approach them with a lot of trepidation, because, when you're restricting a teenager, yet one more restriction of, diet, they get a little testy. But no, they're all fun to work with. But yeah, I think it's really about more or less teaching them how to balance their meals properly, and getting them to at least achieve a level of fitness that they feel great about. And I think, with the populations under 18, I focus a little bit more on fitness. And these are probably people I would send to you.
Sure. Because
they are more apt to follow some sort of an athletic regimen than they are a strict, eating meal plan. And, I have a couple of clients who I work with that are overweight, and they are, I give them a lot of leeway on their program, but I sort of clean up their diet a little bit, and I take all the refined sugar out. That's pretty much the only thing I do with them, is take the refined sugar out. They feel better, they're less hyper, they focus better, and the weight goes down slowly, but it goes down. And so I find less restriction, just more general guidelines with them works better with the younger population.
That population, though, too, it's tough with them, too, because they have social things they're surrounded with food, as well as the older population. They're a little more disciplined if need be, but that younger population is inundated with, sugar-laden foods.
Yes.
Sometimes they don't even realize that they are sugar-laden, because they're not necessarily a sweet, so to say,
yes,
or a candy bar or something like that. They associate that with sugar, but they don't associate, it's necessarily their breakfasts, the granola, the bread, and all the other things that go along with it.
Yes.
So that's a challenge for that population.
And the other thing, the hidden sugar, which is very interesting to me, is they all go out for sushi. So where's the hidden sugar, you say? You know, and they have no idea. It's in the rice. I tell them that if the rice clumps together and it's made into a roll, there's a lot of sugar. So that's their biggest disappointment. So we tell them they can still do the sushi, leave the rice out, and they still enjoy their meal.
Sure, and there's other things they could add in there that are not so high on the glycemic index as well. You know, if you're going to eat those protein sushi, maybe have the little salad that comes with it or something like that. Maybe leave out the rice, which breaks down to glucose and elevates blood sugar. And
right, they
so
can
on.
have a roll that's made out of cucumber instead of rice, and stick the salmon and the avocado in there. And, you know, they get around it. So
and that was one of the things I always loved about your programs, because when I would work with those younger populations and the older ones, which you're going to talk about soon, is I would look over the plans that you would give them, and they're very attainable for young people. It's not like you like majorly altering what they're eating too, but they're smart and they're laid out in a way that they could follow it, and it's not complicated, which was really important for them, because you make it too complicated, they don't have the success that they really need.
Right, or too restrictive. And I find that where I may restrict some of the components of their meals, I'm really lenient with their snacks. So I come up with 20 different snacks, and they love having the choices, and they can, you know, when their friends are going out for Haagen-Dazs or whatever, they're pulling something delicious out of their own, you know, knapsack or whatever, and it works.
Sure. And obviously that younger population is easier for the weight loss, because as far as training goes, obviously I could do more things with them, because the older population, I have to be careful of injuries, and, you know, it has to be more age-related to training, and I could be a little bit more robust with certain types of interval training and lifting and stuff like that, because they're younger. Yes. Obviously, the older population have to be a little bit more careful of the things that I choose with them. So let's talk about the older populations now.
Great. Well, the older population is actually pretty, in some ways, easier and in some ways not. And the only reason I say not is because they've read so much, they've tried so much, and they know so much. Right. So it's hard for me to go in and say, okay, erase everything you've been told and you've read and you know. Right. But on the other hand, once, you know, they've done that, they're ready to lose weight, they're more compliant. And I find that with older people, I'm usually just tweaking their diets ever so slightly. Obviously, if they're older, they've done a lot of the right things already. Right. They just may need a little bit of tweaking. You know, and as we age, the metabolism slows down to a degree that not everyone is aware of it. You know, they think they can eat, you know, a 70-year-old thinks they can eat the way they did at 40 and keep their weight managed. Right. Which is not always the case. But it's not like I'm going to restrict their calories by 50% because they're 30 years older. What I may do is just kind of increase their protein intake a little bit here, maybe decrease the carbs there. It's more about organizing their protein, fat, carb ratios in a certain way. So it's not as much about deprivation with them anymore. It's just about really adjusting the carb, protein, fat ratios in their meals.
Sure, and that's a great strategy for helping those people, because most of the time when it comes down to it is they just need someone to give them the guidance that they need. By the time they usually filter to us through their doctors or whatever, they're kind of open to it. They're like, you know, please help me. I'm not really sure like where it is. I know when you looked over some of my needs, I know when you designed my program, it wasn't that what I was eating was unhealthy. There were just much better choices for what I needed to do. And once I started making some of those changes, the results started to come in a lot quicker. And I was already a fit person and stuff, but I had some things I needed to fine tune that were in my diet, and certain foods just maybe stay away from, and other ones I needed to add more of in. So it wasn't just taking out, but it was adding others in to replace, which actually leads us to some of the other things I wanted to speak with you about. So in modern day, we have, and some older types of eating styles, we'll call them. We have Paleolithic, which is becoming very popular, which is actually a very old way of eating. Yes. Then we have ketogenic, which has probably been around for about 80 years or so. We used to treat certain medical conditions in the past, but now we're using them in current day for dietary needs. We have blood typing, blood type diet, and then also, you know, within that we have, when we say blood typing, we're all from different regions of the planet, and our ancestry has had certain types of foods, and then we moved to a place like New York where we have such a diversity of foods that our body hasn't really had time to adapt to all these different foods. And so the blood typing thing is a little bit, what are your thoughts on, and there are quite a few more, but let's stick to those, because that's probably enough information right there.
Yes.
So give me your thoughts on that.
So it's interesting. So you made some really very, very valid points about, certain foods are indigenous to certain countries and certain cultures. So let's use a very obvious example. So the Asian population has no trouble whatsoever metabolizing white rice.
Right.
And it's a staple in their diet.
Sure.
And as far as I know, I don't see any overweight Asians because they're eating too much rice. So they're all and generally, they're all type O.
Interesting.
Most of them are type O blood type.
Okay.
Not all, but many. So that brings us to here in America, we have a myriad of blood types, and there's a lot of type O's that cannot metabolize white rice well, and some that can. So it's really about figuring out, I think if you're born in China and you eat white rice, you're going to be fine. But if you're born here, I'd say 90% of the people that are born here that are not Asian have trouble metabolizing rice. So I think it's metabolic typing, which is the blood type diet, as well as the region we're born in and what foods are indigenous. They kind of go together.
Okay.
So, and I think, I only really apply those principles of blood type if pretty much the picture is a healthy picture.
Mm-hmm.
If they have candida, if they have high blood pressure, if they have too many things going on, then the blood type diet really doesn't apply.
Right, because it's a lot more complicated, and sometimes weight loss is a little more complicated, because that's why people run into the roadblock.
Yes.
Sometimes with it. They might be on the right path, but there's sometimes there's something that's in the way that's getting them where they are, like you said, like we spoke about gut bacteria and some other things as well, which I'd like to talk to as well, because I know you have a big background working, I can't remember what the doctor's name was, with parasites.
Dr. Biamonte.
Yes, I know you have a large experience doing with that, and I do want to touch on that. What do you feel about now bringing in Paleolithic style of eating, which is, obviously Paleolithic, it's in its name of what it is?
Well, I think, and I know this is a gross generalization because there are so many, eating styles that seem to fit, different people, but I'd say on a whole, I'd say a larger portion, and I'm not going to go into percentages, but a larger portion of the population does well in terms of overall health, wellness, and weight loss on a paleo diet. And that's a gross generalization, but I'm being, just from my own experience, and maybe I've had 1,000, clients over the course of my 17 years, so I have a small cross-section of people, but I've done research and I've read a lot, and generally it's the caveman diet, essentially,
Sure.
which is, protein and fat, almost no grains or very few, lots of vegetables, nuts, and
seeds.
And seeds, getting our fat and protein from sources that are animal, basically. And the proportion of the diet that's, from animal protein is pretty high.
In Paleolithic, yes.
Yes, in Paleolithic. So it seems to be agreeable, and, within certain guidelines, is certainly like red meat, where we talk about red meat, that would show up quite often on a Paleolithic diet if there's no markers for like high cholesterol or triglycerides or homocysteine levels, then it's okay to incorporate red meat once or twice a week. Right. Otherwise, I recommend getting your protein sources from chicken, fish, primarily.
Sure. Okay. So. I know that I do a partial ketogenic and a Paleolithic combination diet myself, and I know that I do much better without the oat, wheat, bran, barley, rice, or corn. I don't really eat any of those.
And that's the gluten connection.
Yeah, it causes a lot of inflammation, joints, eczema, other type effects, and I've noticed it keeps my blood sugar much lower. And now saying that, I also do the ketogenic for the first part of my day, and then I kind of go into more of a Paleolithic later in the day and introduce my carbohydrates in through vegetables and most of my healthy fats and stuff and nuts. Let's talk a little bit about ketogenic, because we're starting to hear a lot of that in the last couple of years become very popular. But it's not that it's new; it's been around for a while. But it's just starting to rear its head a little bit in everyday dietary books, and you'll see it on Dr. Oz and your other health channels, and so a lot of people talking about it. What are your thoughts on ketogenic?
Well, my thoughts versus my experience with it, my thoughts are that it's probably the cleanest, healthiest, most efficient type of diet for not everybody, but specifically for people who have issues with diabetes. Oh yeah,
exactly. Good point. Great point.
Yes, because what happens with the ketogenic diet in a nutshell is your body starts to burn fat for fuel, and you make ketones. So what happens is you're training your body to stop using glucose, which means that for a diabetic, that's like nirvana, because their pancreas is damaged. It's not producing the insulin required to break down the sugar. So we keep stressing it by eating sugar, even grains, for instance.
Sure.
Even healthy grains. I've met diabetics who are eating like oatmeal, and they still can't regulate their blood sugar.
Yeah,
because they're constantly spiking. So it's putting stress on an organ that's already stressed and damaged. The ketogenic diet is perfect for diabetics who want to lose weight and just overall, health and wellness. I mean, yes, would I recommend it for others as well? Maybe people who've tried a lot of different methods of losing weight and have been unsuccessful. I would put them on a ketogenic diet, because what starts to happen is they're going to start, just overall, they're going to have more energy, they're going to have better cognition, they're going to have more energy and sustained energy throughout the day. So I think the biggest issue with the ketogenic diet is I think a lot of people are afraid of it because it doesn't involve, picking foods from all the food groups. It doesn't sound balanced to them. It sounds too extreme. It sounds like a fad. It sounds like, something controversial. But, if we really look at it, we're eating healthy fats from avocados, from eggs, from salmon, from refined coconut oil, which is probably one of the most incredible sources of. It's actually a healthy source of saturated fat.
Extremely high. All the things just mentioned, extremely high in omega-3, which is great for brain functions.
Well. Yes, of course.
Yeah, so that's a great choice.
Yes, so those are my thoughts.
I've noticed, and one thing you mentioned, which is important for you to understand, if you're a type 2 diabetic, you're probably insulin resistant, right? So you're having problems handling blood sugar. And regulating blood sugar, right? Now you said the pancreas has a hard time producing the insulin, but if you're not asking it to produce a lot of insulin, it's almost getting a chance to repair itself, and that time that you're giving it to repair itself also could help you come out of type 2 diabetes, and a lot of studies are starting to show that, which is really promising.
It's 100% correct.
And I mean, a lot of people are on metformin and other pharmaceutical drugs to help regulate their blood sugar, and this seems like a good strategy to help with that. I mean, just the whole mechanism of how it works, if you think about it. But yes, it does scare people when you tell them. I mean, we've spoken a lot about the bulletproof coffee.
Yes.
And why that mechanism works so well, the bulletproof coffee, is because you really haven't eaten anything since, say, 7 p.m. at night, right? You have that whole cycle till the morning. Then you wake up in the morning, you buy something, hey, I need energy. Where's glucose sugar? And we're not going to give it any granola.
Right.
We're not going to have a glass of orange juice. We're going to make coffee. We're going to put some grass-fed butter or ghee in it. We're going to put some MCT oil, which is medium-chain triglyceride oil. And we're not putting tons of it. We're putting enough just to start the fire so the body goes, wait, I don't have these carbohydrates to use glucose, to use as energy, but I have these fats that I could use. These fats can be converted into ketones, and the ketones can be utilized as energy as well. So the body has 2 fuel sources.
So you're tricking the body, really, into using a different mechanism to generate fuel, generate energy, actually.
Yes. And you're actually hacking it to sense. I know that's why the bulletproof coffee, Dave Asprey is like the most famous, we'll call him biohacker, right?
Right.
And what are you doing? You're telling the body, hey, let's use the fat on our body, but the fat is always offline if the blood sugar is high. If your blood sugar is high, it is never going to use ketones for energy, nor is it going to use fat on the body for energy. It's just not there. It's offline. So if you keep the blood sugar low, and especially in the morning is your best opportunity not to access the fat, we'll say.
Yes.
Because your blood sugar is low, you just woke up, you haven't eaten anything, it's the lowest point it is. Now you're not giving it any more sugar or glucose, and you're giving it ketones. So you're really jumpstarting, you're forcing the body into this ketogenic state using ketones. So it's great for a weight loss mechanism. I personally use it in the morning. I'll do the coffee, and then and I know you use it as well. And later in the day, I incorporate some soft-boiled eggs into when I start getting hungry. I push it back. Like if I start getting hungry I get up at 5 a.m. in the morning. I'll have my coffee and I'll sip it through the morning with these elements in the coffee. And then I'll have the eggs later. When I start getting hungry, I'll push it back like a half hour. If I start getting hungry at 11, I'll push it to 11:30. I'll have 2 soft-boiled eggs and avocado. But I still have not introduced any sugar or carbohydrates into my bloodstream yet. So now what's happening is forcing my body to use the fat on my body. Later in the day, that's when I had mentioned I switched over to more of a Paleolithic. Then later in the day, I'll have like a salad, and I'll have my vegetables, and I'll add some of those things in, and I'll have like maybe a piece of chicken, fish, steak, some type of variety, and I'll vary those throughout the weeks so I can have different nutrition. And I'll have some macadamias, which are very high in omega-3s and healthy fats. So I'll have some walnuts, some pecans, or some almonds, not large amounts of them, but like maybe like a handful, and I'll choose different ones throughout the week so I have a variety of those. And that tends to give you the fiber necessary, because remember, when we take out some of these grains, people say, you're taking out all the grains, I don't have any of the fiber. What am I going to have? Well, the nuts have sweet potatoes, and the nuts have tons of
have a lot of fiber.
Has a lot of fiber in them. So interesting how we could use some of these different ways of eating and even kind of hybridize them a little bit so that they can be synergistic with each other, and we can kind of have a more robust way of eating and give us more things to eat while taking out some of the unhealthy things and adding in some of these really healthy foods that most people enjoy having.
Yes.
Like people enjoy having some of these foods that we're talking about. I could have butter again, yes, but the timing, that's why the programming of where you put them in is very important.
Yes, and the best part, which we didn't touch on at all, and this is, maybe a question people will ask, like, well, what do you do about the cravings? The best part is they go away.
They do go away.
They really disappear, and I don't crave sugar. I've been doing the ketogenic diet as well with the bulletproof. I've been doing the bulletproof diet as well. I don't crave sugar. I'll have like a sweet potato at the end of the day. I feel like I've eaten candy.
Yes.
And it's still keeping me in, ketosis, which is the state that my body is in to burn fat. So that's really the best part, I think. That's kind of like the icing on the cake, so to speak.
Yeah.
That their cravings really go away.
They do, and sometimes when I notice when I eat some of those foods that have more sugar, I'm like, whoa, this is really sweet. And I didn't realize how sweet it was because I was constantly eating carbs. I always managed to stay lean because I was athletic and did a lot of sports. But I was always, I'm almost 50 now, and I entered into my 40s, I still had about the same activity level, but I noticed that it was harder for me to keep my, my body composition, my fat levels lower. So that was a really big part. Now, one thing about ketosis, when we talk about ketosis is a state at which when the body's starving, it uses fat as energy. But what we're talking about is nutritional ketosis.
Yes.
So we're in ketosis, forcing the body to use fat as energy, but we're also nutritional because we're giving it foods that are very high in minerals, omega oils, and some of these other things. When ketosis, usually when you spoke to other people, like, well, that means you're starving, right? Atkins talked about this almost 2 decades ago.
Right.
My only problem with the Atkins diet was mechanically it worked.
Yes.
But I wasn't a big fan of eating tons of bacon and all these animal fats because I knew they weren't necessarily the healthy fats I wanted. Whereas as time went on, people like the mechanism of what he talked about, and it was great that he brought it to the forefront, but I wasn't in love with some of the choices of fats they chose. But now we know that we could substitute those for healthier fats, right? We could have the MCT oil, we could have the nuts, we could have the fish, we could have some of those other things and still have that state and still have the weight loss that most people are looking for, and you won't crave the sugars. I don't crave sugar really at all, and like even when I go shopping now, I go, wow, I used to really get that. I used to eat I remember when you did my program, I remember you taking out mangoes and bananas.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but I love those. Those are my favorites. Those are like the most high sugar, and they were spiking my insulin. And even though I was being athletic and putting a lot of time in at the gym, I still wasn't getting the results I wanted. And was having the higher protein, all that, but it was the bottom line was, I think for me, was that you limited what I was eating and you lowered my blood sugar. And once you lowered my blood sugar and we started incorporating some of these other methods, did I really see it now? It's my body fat's like 12%, 10, 12%, the leanest I've ever been.
Right.
Thankfully to you and giving me some different choices. And that's really big for a lot of people.
Yes.
The choices. Choices is huge. And it makes them successful, and it gives them a strategy that they can carry on for the rest of their life, and they can move on. And that's why our business has grown, because
Yes.
They tell all their friends, and they go, I don't understand. Next thing we know, we're seeing all their friends. Now we see some of their children now,
Yeah.
and we're seeing generations that are starting to add in.
And the best part is, eating this way, you can eat quite a bit of food.
Yes.
But the volume of food is almost non-restrictive. And it's kind of a catch-22, because these healthy fats create satiety faster.
Yes, they
So
do.
you don't require as much food, even though you're entitled to it. And that's kind of the, that's like the panacea, is knowing you can eat as much as you want, but not really needing to.
I know.
So there are not too many types of, eating styles that have that ability.
Yeah. I think one of the things about just putting butter and this oil in the coffee, when I first started, I'm going, man, I'm trying to like lose weight, and I'm like adding this, something didn't feel right. But then when I truly understood the science behind it and actually saw it working, it was like obvious what was going on, and that it really did work. And my cognitive function was a lot better. And
How long have you been doing the bulletproof diet?
I have been doing the bulletproof coffee now for almost 2 years. I was always a coffee drinker. I loved coffee anyway. I grew up in a big Italian family. Coffee was like something that, we always had. But I was doing it all wrong in the sense that I was adding, I would try to add like maple syrup or different things, have a lower glycemic index. But ultimately, and then I would put a little bit of half-half in it. But now the bulletproof coffee is like, it's so much better. Now I'm putting ghee in there, and I'm putting this MCT oil, and I put it in a thermos, and I just shake it up and take a little sip. And it's like, wow, this tastes great, and I don't miss the sweetness of it at all. It has made a profound difference, and I have a couple of people that I train with and stuff that were drinking coffee anyway, and I'm like, just try the coffee this way, and just restrict the eating, till later in the day, and give yourself a couple of hours before you eat, and then eat something like I was saying, like some soft-boiled eggs, and
Right.
I'll bring some macadamias, and some of the foods that you mentioned, and made a very big difference. Let's talk about some of your background that most people don't know about the gut bacteria and some of the parasites. And like you said, sometimes it's not so much of the diet you put together, but sometimes you have some complications along the way that they don't have proper flora in their stomach, and they need to eat some of these other foods that are maybe fermented that'll give them the proper, bacteria in their stomach.
Yes. Well, I guess the first topic, it starts with the word antibiotics, because that really kind of destroys the balance of flora in the gut. And a lot of people don't know this, but 90% of our immune system and how the immune system functions is a direct correlation to how, how much and how balanced our gut bacteria is. And if we don't have a good environment in our gut, the immune system doesn't function right. And there are a myriad of even, mental and emotional issues that are connected to, not having enough gut bacteria. And I know that there's a large population of people who've had parasites, which also messes up the balance of good bacteria. So, what would you like to know?
Well, there's a couple of other things in there too, which people don't realize. It's not just antibiotics. It's glyphosate that's being sprayed. It's the pesticides,
Right.
which are sprayed all over the foods.
Yes.
When we talk about food, me and you, I know we say this all the time, me and you default to organic. Not necessarily saying that if you're eating organic, you're avoiding those, because it's cross-pollination on fields, and so it's hard. But But ultimately, we try to have the best quality of food when we're eating. We're trying to choose foods that are grass-fed and organic, right?
Yes.
We're trying to choose fishes that are wild caught, that are not just swimming in a farm tank if we can. We're talking about chickens that are organic and they're not like, in industrial farming.
Yes.
We're not talking about vegetables that are not sprayed industrial with pesticides and glyphosate.
That's a good point. I didn't even bring up glyphosate, because what that does is not only does it damage the internal, we call it dysbiosis, when there's a chaotic environment in the intestine, when the bacteria is completely destroyed and the bad bacteria proliferates. Not only does glyphosate do that, but it also damages the lining of the intestinal tract in profound ways. I mean, there's some, they used to relate celiac disease to the incidence of when glyphosate was added to our crops. There was a huge incidence of celiac disease, and I don't know if it's a coincidence what happened first, but I know that there's a lot of damage done to the internal environment, which is critical. So
it's very critical, because if you don't, like you were saying before, if you don't have proper digestive bacteria, they're not able to fight off certain pathogens or even parasites. I mean, when we talk about parasites, we're not necessarily talking about hookworms and things. We're talking about basic fungal mold things that our body is able naturally to have a defense against. But if we've disturbed the biome of the digestive system, it doesn't have a fighting chance that it would normally have, because it's already been impaired.
Yes.
Which is a very big problem, because it's almost like taking your immune system down. And if you're taking foods in, you need an immune system to be able to decipher what it needs from it. And some of these things the body was never designed to have, they're chemicals basically, and it doesn't know what to do with them.
Right.
And digestive and brain health are tied together very strongly.
100%.
So if your gut biome is not right, all these things traveling through vagus nerves and different things, and they're traveling to the brain, they're crossing the blood-brain barrier, and people feel as if they don't have, they're anxious or they have a lot of other things. It's because the biome is off and the whole system is off a little bit. So that balance is very important too. So that was one of the things I found really helpful, and you had some strategies of ways to help with some of those things. And there was, some of them were very simple, and they were passed on to us for generations. Like we talked about the oregano oil, and some basic things that just help with basic, molds and fungal things that get caught up in our digestive systems and prevent absorption and of minerals and vitamins, which is why we're eating food, right? Because we want to be healthy and we want to have, we're eating food for fuel, but if the fuel is tampered with, it's not really helping us. It's actually slowing us down if the wrong fuels are in there. So maybe go a little deeper into some of those parts of some of those things that could be helpful for people, just for general, well-being of getting rid of some of these things that could be in the system that are naturally occurring.
Well, the best kind of way to think of it is, there are obviously invisible microbes on our food, right? Even if it's healthy and organic. So what we can do is ingest things like oregano oil. Oregano is wonderful for killing all kinds of funguses, yeast, and bacteria. That's a given. And I know one of the main chicken manufacturers are now giving putting oregano oil in the water so that they can manufacture healthy chickens.
Interesting.
Yes.
I use the oregano oil myself, the P73. That's the one that I personally, the extra strength one, and I do add it every now and then with a couple of different herbs that we spoke about every now and then, just for basic cleansing and so on.
Right. So here's what happens. So let's say you kill off all the bad bacteria with oregano oil or grapefruit seed extract, and then what? Sometimes the good bacteria will start to regrow. Depends how damaged your gut lining is. Sometimes the good bacteria doesn't regrow even if you remove the bad bacteria. See, what happens is there's only a certain amount of space, okay? So you think of the bad bacteria as taking up real estate in your intestines. And what sometimes happens is you remove the bad bacteria, it gives the good bacteria more room to proliferate. And but if the gut lining has been very damaged, sometimes there's not enough good bacteria to populate. So we have to introduce probiotics.
Sure.
Which is, if you're taking the right probiotics, I can't speak highly enough about the right probiotics. They make a world of difference in terms of digestion, brain health, gut health,
sure.
immune function, just overall digestion and elimination. And, you know, I recommend a good probiotic for pretty much anyone and everyone who is, well, one, ever taken antibiotics, which
sure.
many of us have, and two, just overall for people who travel a lot, who go overseas, and they're exposed to more microbes. But generally, it's important to take them on a day-to-day basis. I take a good one every day.
Sure.
Once a day in the morning, I get my probiotic, and I'm done.
Sure. So. I'm noticing a lot of prebiotics starting to come into the market now, too, to feed the... So you take the probiotics, you take that's like a prebiotic that actually gives these microbes healthy food to eat so that they can grow and flourish. And I think switching them too, I've heard, is helpful too. So it could be a little bit more diverse as far as the healthy probiotics. So if you have one brand, maybe take that for a couple of months and then switch to sometimes something else, so that you have a little more diversity in there as well.
Yes.
So that's a good strategy too. If you take the same thing for 3 years, it's probably limited as far as how much diversity you're going to have in your gut bacteria.
I agree.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to kind of introduce some of these. You could do fermented foods too, which was something you spoke with me about as well. Having some of your sauerkrauts and different, horseradish leek meals and different kinds of foods will incorporate some of these natural probiotics, and they're not gluten-based, and they tend to fill in people's diets. I know I use them for foods that I kind of used to fulfill the want for that crunchiness for for certain types of grains. Now just throw some horseradish leek or sauerkrauts on my dish, along with, say, if I'm having a piece of fish or something like that. So I try to add some of those in, and they give me the healthy probiotics.
Yes, naturally fermented sauerkraut is like one of the best sources of probiotics.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of different ways to go about it. And some of the foods we spoke about too, when we spoke about eating some of these nuts and different foods, a lot of them naturally have a surrounding on them that keeps insects from them. And was it fusidic acid that coats the nuts and the seeds? It's like a protective, almost like a barrier. It's like why our grandparents basically soaked beans and stuff overnight, because that would actually help them release, and then they would strain it and rinse it, and then it made it more digestible.
Yes, we don't assimilate the nutrients with the skins of the nuts intact.
Yeah.
So we have to sort of soak them to open those up. And one example is like sprouting your almonds.
Yeah.
So the skin pops off, or the outer coating pops off, and you get the interior of the almond. And when you soak it, it brings out the nutritional value, and it's easily assimilated when you eat them.
Interesting, because a lot of people run and they'll grab like raw nuts and think they're doing themselves good by having the raw nuts, but the raw nuts also have sometimes fungal or stuff, parasites on them, because they might come from, like, the cashews might come from Turkey, and they've sat in a big container for months on the way over here, and then they sat in a health food store, and then by the time we take them out of the bulk thing for the weight, we brought them home and they have funguses and stuff on them. So we soak them, and one of your tricks you taught me was about the grapeseed extract, a couple of drops of that, and then let them soak. That'll kill any of the parasites or whatever we might want to say, funguses that are on there. We rinse it a couple, and then I let it sit overnight, and then the next day I take them, rinse them quite a bit, and you'd be surprised, there's quite a bit of mucky stuff on top of the water. Rinse all that off, and that's a lot of the coatings that we were talking about. I'll dry them, just basically pick that, and I'll put them in a dehydrator, and the dehydrator will make the nuts crunchy again. And now we've removed everything, and now they're more digestible, and I can take in all the good enzymes and all the vitamins that are from it. So talking about making food powerful, that's probably a good strategy to do that as well.
Well, that's one, and then there's another piece to that. I'll just take it a step further. Chewing.
Yeah, like really
when
chewing
you really
your food.
break down your nuts, you release the enzymes of the food that you're eating if you really chew your food well. So the first first step would be to follow what you just suggested and to soak your nuts, and then once you've done that, dehydrate them and then chew them really well, and you've got like the maximum value from those nutrients.
Sure, and that probably goes even to be said for, you know, when we're eating meats, like say like when we do eat the red meat, a lot of people, they eat very fast and they're not really chewing the food and really breaking it down by the time it goes in the digestive system. You're asking a lot of your body to break down these clumps of food when most of the digestion is really going on in the mouth.
Yes.
To really, you know, chew the food and take your time in between it and really break down the food. It's part of all the saliva and stuff really is part of digestion.
We're equipped to get the most value out of food the way our, you know, mouths are. We have teeth, you know, for a reason, and, you know, we just need to slow down a little bit and really, you know, take the time to figure out how to get the most out of our food.
Sure. Before we wrap it up, I wanted to ask you one more thing. I know we had, I probably should include this earlier, but what are your thoughts on vegetarianism versus vegan? And I noticed that with some of the vegans, noticed that when we would get their blood work back, they'd be very low in B vitamins. The Bs were very low, and we saw definitely some significant losses in some of the minerals in there. What do we do as far as strategies? Do we supplement with them? What are your thoughts about being a vegetarian? And also, we talked about regional eating and people who come from other countries, and I know when you design their programs, say they're kosher, and they hold a kosher home. How do you strategize for those type of programs for them?
All right, so there's the kosher thing.
Just kosher.
And then
vegetarian,
right, the vegetarianism. All right, so vegetarianism can include fish, eggs, and dairy.
Yes.
Okay, so that helps a lot. I think the vegan diet is the lacking the most, especially in zinc. And some Bs, they have to eat a huge amount of brown rice to get enough B vitamins to really, or to get their recommended daily allowance of B vitamins, which most of us get through our grains.
Sure. But
they're lacking in zinc. And zinc primarily is in fish. And when they're lacking in zinc, their immune system is not functioning as well. Yes, they can, build up their diet with, pumpkin seeds, which are high in zinc.
Sure.
But how many pumpkin seeds can you eat? You'd have to eat about, I'd say 2 or 3 pounds a day.
Right.
In order to get the amount of zinc.
Yes.
So, vegan diets, I think, are very extreme. They're not necessarily the healthiest diets because they typically don't have enough really good sources of protein.
Right.
So that's my thought on that. But the vegetarianism, I don't think there's a problem with that. I think, the vegetarian diet, if they're ovo-lacto vegetarians, which include usually dairy and eggs. Mm-hmm. Some include fish if they're pescatarian. Those are probably the healthiest forms of vegetarians. They're ovo-lacto as well as pescatarian. So they include dairy, eggs, and fish in their diet, which will automatically round out their nutrient profile.
Sure.
I think if a vegetarian is aware of their nutrient content, mm-hmm. I think they can exist on a fairly good regimen.
I agree with that because I have quite a few vegetarians that I train, and now that they have more of like a guidelines of what some of those things to add in, it's fine. I did find that the vegans were tired. They, at the end of the day, when they would come to train, I felt like they were just low energy because they were just not eating the right foods.
Yeah.
Obviously, we would try to get them on a better eating plan, but.
Vegans tend to eat more processed foods because, anything that doesn't have animal products you can pick up in a store, like baked goods and pastries and things of that sort that don't have eggs. They think, ooh, these are perfect. But the ultimate problem is they're not really hitting all the nutritional values as well. Right. As efficiently as like a vegetarian might.
And they're eating a lot of those foods that are sprayed with the glyphosate and those things too, if they're not organic and stuff, and they're eating excessive amounts of oat, wheat, bran, barley, and those things, and those tend to be very inflammatory, and they have their own cascade of effects that usually happen along with it. So, you know, you have like this very finely tuned balance of different ways of eating and educating yourself on them.
Yes.
You know, I find most of the vegans tend to be more for their beliefs of not killing animals, and I respect that and I totally get it. But when you think about your own personal health, you have to think about what your needs are. You know, if you're a woman getting close to menopause, or if you're a child if you're in high school and you decide to make this decision and you're just in puberty, it's really important to have the right substrates so your body can really flourish and grow, and you can concentrate when you're in school, and, you know, not have ADD and all these other things that are happening because you actually have proper nutrition. So yeah,
Yes.
those are all things that need to be thought of.
And the biggest issue with the wrong diet is inflammation. That's
Yes.
probably the biggest issue, which we could probably talk about for another hour on another
So
series.
we'll do another episode about some of the other things, about how we connect some of the fitness part of it with it, and, you know, maybe we'll go through a couple of programs and stuff in a later episode. And your last thoughts on kosher, because we have a lot of kosher people that we work with here in the city, in New York City. What are your thoughts with that?
I mean, kosher is really particularly relating to the meat that they eat.
Right.
And if they're eating any snack bars or anything, things that are processed, I think it's a tricky question. I mean, kosher meats, I'm 100% for them. It's probably this next best thing to organic.
Right.
Organic and kosher, I think that's the best of all worlds.
Sure, because you have the way that the blood is drained, and
Exactly.
You know, sure.
So yeah, I think in terms of eating kosher meats, absolutely, it has my vote. Everything else, I'm really not sure, because I don't really understand the entire process of kosher. You know, was a rabbi paid off, you know, a certain number of dollars to bless a product and then
Right.
call it kosher? Or is it just a product that's free from dairy or free from eggs? So I think kosher is just, you know, a guideline.
Okay.
Essentially, I don't have any real other thoughts on kosher, except that kosher meats and kosher, you know, poultry meat, yeah, I think they're good quality, and I don't see anything wrong with it.
It's interesting because it was how a civilization tried to stay alive in a time when they were trying to protect their food while they were traveling, across the desert or whatever, and the way that, you know, you protect your food supply and you protect your people. And now we're in modern time, we have refrigeration and we have a lot of other things, but the philosophy of what it stood for still stands today, and we still need to protect our food and think about what we're eating and how they either enhance our life or they make our life full of sickness and obesity and type 2 diabetes.
Yes.
So, you know, food is for health, you know what I mean? And you have to view food that way, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you to be one of the first episodes, because most people know me for fitness and massage therapy and, you know, post-rehabilitation and stuff. And diet and eating is something that I usually find myself talking about my clients with almost the most, because it's where they usually go wrong the most, because they don't have an understanding of it. And that's when I usually introduce them to you, or depending on who sends me the people and how I meet them. But it ends up being a big conversation with a lot of them. And so thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
It was a great time speaking with you, and reinforcing some things that I already believe and I know you believe. Thank you, viewers. Be well.